Good afternoon, everyone. So today we're going to be talking about designing people-first cities and the rise of active and micromobility. My name is Ben Hubbard. I'm the executive editor of Zag Daily. We are a global media publication focused exclusively on sustainable mobility. Today we have an esteemed panel. We have a bike mayor. We have an accessibility specialist. We have the CEO of one of the very few profitable shared micromobility operators globally. And we have a streets planner, but I'm going to let them introduce themselves first. But really, this is about how do we make cities more livable, so we design cities for people and not cars. Over to you, Tara, if you're able to just introduce yourself.
Thank you so much, Ben. Hi, everyone. My name is Tara Uzra, and I'm CEO of Daoud Global Foundation. And we are global specialists in accessibility mobility. And that means when streets are being designed or mayors are thinking about how their city comes together, it can be absolutely forgotten, the unseen, the voiceless. And in this case, we're focusing on the handy-capable, but for some cities, we even focus on women's needs or children's needs, which are also often forgotten and voiceless in those conversations. So I'm Tara Uzra, CEO of Daoud Global Foundation. Thank you.
Well, I'm Manuel de Araujo, the mayor of Quelimane city in Mozambique. And Quelimane city is a coastal city in Mozambique, and it's about 500,000 inhabitants.
Afternoon, everyone. So my name's David Milner, Managing Director of Create Streets. We're an urban design specialist. We're also a town builder and a think tank. I've got a sort of slightly strange background where I used to be in the military as well, flying helicopters, but I've got very passionate about creating sustainable places. And our view is transport and planning and urban design are, they're two sides of the same coin. So where you put your school, this could be the biggest transport decision you make.
I'm Agustin. I'm the CEO and founder of Forest. We started with 200 e-bikes in London. Now we have 20,000 e-bikes in London. We are the second e-bike operator after Lime. And our vision and goal is to transform London to be the best city to cycle in the world. I will tell you later how.
Thank you. Manuel, I'm going to come to you first because you have been dubbed the bike mayor of Africa for introducing the first cycle lane to Mozambique. Okay, that's a hell of a feat. 40% of trips are now taken by foot and 35% by bike. I feel like you are the best person to be asking this question. How do you win public support to reallocate street space away from cars?
Well, I think it's very important for us to recognize that any decision taken is a political decision. And as such, it can harm some or it may benefit others. So it's a struggle for power. It's a process where you need to win the hearts, but also to win the mind. And most of the times, you need to be strategic, you need to be persuasive, but sometimes you need to be bully in the positive sense. For example, when I was first elected as a mayor in 2011, those cycling in Quelimane were seen as third or even fourth class citizens, were seen like as the poor. You would cycle in principle because you couldn't afford a motorbike or a car or any other means of transport. But I decided with my team to change that culture, that practice. And one of the ways I did was to start biking myself. That's why the name or the nickname, the biking or cycling mayor, because I go from home to work or to other places by using a bike. Because I was convinced that if we want to change the way people think and consider by cycling, we need to lead by example. And that's exactly what I did. And slowly, we start changing the culture. But of course, as expected, those well-off, those who thought that roads were primarily built for car owners, they fought back. And you need to have a strategy to not only to consolidate those who you want to support, but also you need to be ready to fight back, because a movement of car owners in my city was created. As we speak today, I have a trial marked because the car owners took the case of building cycle lanes to court, because in their view, I was stealing their space. Because for them, roads in my city were primarily built for car owners, not for walking, not for cycling. And my point is exactly the opposite. I think that we need to democratize the roads. And according to the data you shared here, 35% are those cycling and 40% are those walking. Therefore, I want to distribute the main roads in my city according to that percentage. Just last week, we were appointed by a think tank as the #1 active mobility city in Africa. And last year, the famous magazine, The Economist, named Quelimane first and Utrecht in the Netherlands third, which really, for us, it was an incentive to continue pushing for these changes. But as I said, just to finalize here, it is a power struggle, and we need to be ready to confront those who are against our vision, and of course, while winning the hearts and minds of those who are willing to walk or to talk the walk.
Thank you, Manuel. I think that's a really good point, to lead by example and feel the pain points yourself, and then you're in a much stronger position to be able to advocate for everyone. David, you've also spoken about democratizing in terms of the designs process with your work at Create Streets. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I was going to say, I absolutely love the phrase democratize roads, because we always talk about democratizing design and democratizing architecture and buildings, and sort of listening to people and not just saying, here's your one city architect, they've got the keys, they can do whatever they want. But when it comes to kind of change, firstly, obviously you need a strong mayor who's going to kind of go through the slump and the criticism to come out the other side. But we don't talk about transport. We wouldn't, if we're looking at a bike lane or a tram line or whatever it might be, we wouldn't talk about the transport. We'd show pictures of the street. And you'd look at this street, you'd look at the buildings on the side, you'd look at the pavements, you'd look at the people or lack of people. And then you ask people, and you've got to do this genuinely. You can't do this with a plan in your back pocket. This is the tower block we really want to build. Do you really like it, or do you like it a little bit? You've got to go with a blank sheet of paper and properly engage. And then you start asking people, what do you want? And they'll tell you, we want a tree, we want wider pavements, we want it to be easier to push my buggy around, I can't get a wheelchair across the road, whatever it may be. You put all of these things in, you design a collective vision, and then by chance you probably find out you've lost some parking spaces, but you don't start with that sort of the pinch point and the loss, and you try and get people inside the tent. So I think for us, it's about start with your vision and start with engaging the local population on exactly what's going to go in, and then be realistic with them that, look, you can have this, but you're going to lose a little parking space here, or you might lose a bit of road space. And that's led us to a bit of success in this.
And also, I think make a lot of sense to understand what the city or the people needs. That's, I think, the priority when you are planning in the future for a city. In the case of London, for example, you can see that the use of one car park, we were seeing in the previous panel that is 95% of the time is not being used, a car park. If you use that space for 10 bikes, that in average those bikes are being using 5 a day, is 50 rides versus 1. So what makes more sense, to give that space for cars or for sharing bikes? So that's the question that also we need to align between the mayor and the operators to give more space if the city require and if the users are asking for more space for bikes.
Just on that, Agustin, what do you think is the greatest policy lever that a city can implement to shift space away from cars? Because we write about this all the time. There's low traffic neighborhoods, there's 20-mile-per-hour limits, there's congestion charges, SUV charges. What have you seen has made the greatest difference?
I think in general in cities, cities are pushing for less use of the cars. That's quite clear in the main capitals, in Europe at least. And the reason why it is, the lack of space. Cities are very crowded, so what we have been seeing in London is that it's super expensive to use a car, so you need to find more alternatives for that. So London has a great history in mobility, and I think the future for London, it is about giving more space for the bike sharing. Like people really are using, there are a couple of people here has been in London, and it's the best way to move. So we need to understand the data and understand also what people need nowadays from move from A to B, and that it is now the answer. It is more space. Take space from private cars and give it to bikes.
I'm going to move the conversation on to accessibility. So Tara, you are without a doubt an accessibility specialist through and through. How do you make spaces more accessible for people with disabilities, people that are blind? How do you make those spaces more accessible and driving that shift away from cars?
Thank you so much, Ben. As people have stated earlier, the other panelists, it's very important to think of the vision first. And so the first step is having the stakeholders in the conversation. So that's where it's very important to have handy-capable either representatives or experts have a seat at the table when discussions are taking place. So as you begin looking at ways, obviously there are wide, unobstructed sidewalks to allow for wheelchair users, guide dog teams, and mobility devices. But you can also curb cuts, ramps at every intersection, level entrances to public buildings. When I've arrived in Riyadh and people have found out about my skill set, one of the things they've come to me and said, please help us in Riyadh. It's not just the metro, which we had the pleasure of visiting yesterday, but also the schools, the hospitals. They're not geared up, thinking in mind of the handy-capable. And so that's why when you go to the design and first steps, you have to look at all those elements. There's also low-floor buses. Have you ever tried to step onto the bus, which has a higher step ramp? It's not pleasant if you're especially a petite female, but imagine that you're handy-accessible, like you're a handy-capable person. Having audio and visual announcements at stops. Elevators in all subway and train stations. Some of the most progressive cities in the world, even if you look at New York City or London, there's not actually accessibility at every station, especially working accessibility. Pedestrian crossing signals are very important, but also adapted street lighting. And now they have amazing solar lights that you can put in streets, which are also sustainable and energy efficient. But that can be a lifesaver for those who are trying to struggle to cross the path. Thank you.
Do you think that AI is playing more of a role in accessibility, and if so, how? Because this is such a buzzword at the moment, right? Particularly in the mobility sphere. How is AI being used to promote and build accessibility within city streets?
That is such a clever question, Ben, a really important point, because AI is actually a useful tool, particularly when it comes to predicting areas which are not as safe. So let's say you have an amazing design team and they do wide ramps and they do all the right places, but in a nearby area, there's places that you can easily trip or a wheelchair can end up not making it through on the street near the area. So with AI, you can have data analysis and predictive spaces. Where are accidents happening? Where are people falling? You will be able to assess the data. And AI using predictive analysis can be extremely useful, as well as keeping track of what's happening and letting you know what's expected to happen next.
Are any of you using the AI models more in your sphere of work?
I think we are A to B more than AI in mobility.
Sure.
But we are using a lot of AI for parking, for predicting demand, for trying to have the bikes in the right location. It's quite funny how it works, mobility in general in terms of logistics, because, for example, if in the morning was raining, people, of course, they are not able to use the bike, but in the afternoon, they want to use them to with the way back. So how you move those bikes to those points, we use a lot of AI to predict what is going to happen and which point the bikes will need to be available for a user to be able to way back to home safe.
Agustin, you've been leading Forest for some time now, and London has become arguably the bike capital of the world, maybe Paris as well. There are over 75,000 bikes now in London, and you're responsible for about 20,000 of those.
And growing.
So shared micromobility is now playing a pivotal role in how people move around in London.
I think the answer is absolutely yes, and we are bringing more bikes because the city is asking for more. But let's talk about a little bit of numbers. 4 years ago, in 2020, there was approx 250 million rides in bikes in general in London. Today is the double. 500 million rides by bike in just, so the double in just 4 days. So what is happening? Because you can ask, and the answer is that the user like to move from A to B in an e-bike, that's all. And why we were able to what we did different from the rest operator to make it happen, and it's related to democratization. Like we give like every day, like up to even 30 minutes free. We have a different business model that is related to ads. So it's like we are like the Spotify of micromobility, because at the end, people can use our bike for free. And there is another brand that is paying for that. So that's a little bit about the business model. We have been able to bring a lot of new people to use e-bikes. We do approximately like 3,000 new users every day in London, moving from public transportation to bikes. So we really believe that for London and for many cities, London has always been trending in mobility, was the first one to have the tube in almost 150 years ago. So. And what I'm trying to say here, that we really believe that London could be the best city to cycle in the world. So, and it's simply it is because people want to move from A to B in a faster way, affordable way, and convenience and reliable. So I think the bike is finally back again to stay. This industry, as everyone knows, has been like upside down because of the investment behind. But we have demonstrated that we're profitable, that we can do business, that we are sustainable. We are the only micromobility to be certified by BER and B Corp. So that's the original idea of the name Forest. So we try to reforest London with our bikes that are free and sustainable for everyone in London. So nowadays, we are by far the most affordable and sustainable solution from move to A to B in London. And if we are here to talk about the future of mobility, I think that the bike, it is the future. It's just that we need to align with the regulation, with the city, to give more space so the user can easily park and find a bike in less than a minute, wherever you want to go.
I think the more the cycle lane now than the length of the London Underground. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, London has been invested a lot. It's not 100% connected between all the boroughs, but they have been invested a lot, and you can see the utilization. In our case, since 2022, our users are doing the double of rides per month than in 2 years ago. And why? Because they feel more confident of using bikes. And why? Because it's like a voice. I mean, there's a funny story about London this year. It was a tube strike. Very famous one.
Your best day ever, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was our best day by far. We did more than 150,000 rides in just 1 day. Of course, there's a lot of challenge behind battery swap, but that's for another story. But what I'm trying to say that a lot of people who was not able to move that day from A to B using the tube, they tried the bikes. And the best part is that after that, they keeping us using. So at the end, it was not a day. It was a situation where they were forced to test the e-bike, and they realized that it's a better way to move. And it's, of course, in my opinion, very complementary with the public transportation service. So we are here to help, to support, and to make people happy in our e-bikes too.
Manuel, you won a grant for $400,000 from Bloomberg to introduce a number of cycle lanes. Can you share a little bit about your targets in Mozambique? And how you think that will kind of play out over the next 5 years?
Well, as you well said, Quelimane is on the forefront in terms of active mobility. It's number one, not only for Mozambique, but for Africa. And we were the first city in Mozambique to build a cycle lane. I mean, we started by a small experiment where we raised, I mean, as you may know, most of the global south cities, have the challenge in terms of financial resources. And we started by getting 23,000 euros from the Portuguese Environmental Fund for us to try with the first 3,000 meters of cycle line. Of course, there was a huge debate if it was really needed, if it was necessary, if that should be the priority of the city, and so on. But like our view was that we are having a lot of accidents in the city, from cars to bicycles and vice versa, or motorbikes. But people were not really caring because they thought, well, those are the poor, they are the ones suffering. So our way was like to bringing a certain problem that we identified to the policy-making table. Like, those who were like the third-class citizens, to bring their challenges, their issues to the table. And then we used those 3,000 meters of cycle to prove, because again, data is very important. If you have data, you are more convincing. It's more easier to show what you are trying to do. So we were able, with data from that first experience, to prove that we managed to decrease the number of accidents, not only daily, but weekly, monthly, and then annually. Then we took that example. With those numbers, we made a case that we applied for a contest which was launched by Bloomberg Philanthropies, which is an institution based in New York. They launched a worldwide contest, and about 265 cities worldwide applied, and Quelimane city was among the 10 chosen cities, side by side with big cities like Bogota, like Lisbon, like Milan, and Addis Ababa, and so on. So we were in that range of the best 10 city proposals. And then we were awarded 400,000 US dollars to improve the infrastructure. And one of the reasons, we applied was that we realized it's not only the fact that those like the handicapped could not use, but was the fact also that women and children were not cycling in my city. And then we made a survey to try to understand why women and children were not cycling. And the number one answer by far, which they gave us, was because we didn't have the infrastructure. They did not feel secure to cycle. So once we managed to build that, to create better safety conditions, definitely more women and more children started cycling. And so that for us is like an incremental approach that we are using. And with these 400,000 US dollars, we are planning to have a radius of 10 kilometers of
10 kilometers.
Yes.
Okay. By what time frame?
Sorry?
By when are you going to be introducing?
Well, by June next year.
Okay.
Yes, we'll be able. Now, we are on 5,000 kilometers. Yeah. 5 kilometers, and we hope, by June next year to have 5,000 meters on that.
Tara, you were nodding there in agreement. What did you want to say there?
Well, whenever you're looking at vulnerable groups, it's a question of whoever is voiceless and unseen. Yeah. So whether that's handicapable or, as just mentioned, women and children, it's very critical to understand what the thought is that, one, they're not, let's say, cycling, and what would make them cycle. But even if you look at a novice cyclist, anyone here who's not an expert cyclist, when you see how quickly a strong cyclist moves, you may not realize how intimidating it is for either a pedestrian, a woman or child who may not be familiar with that, or a child that might not be as seen if it's not as well lit area, but also to cars. When you talked about how to decide spaces, sometimes the fast-moving cyclists are actually intimidating to the cars.
Yeah.
I know the legal policy is that the cyclist is right if a car hits a cyclist, but sometimes I know people who are quite terrified when they're driving because the cyclist may not follow the traffic laws and might move very quickly. So including an understanding of women's needs being different, and especially children, whose not only height but experience may be very different. So it's wonderful how you've countered that.
Thank you. No, if you allow me, I just want to give you an example. A friend was coming from another city to visit me, and he came into my city, and he saw so many bicycles that he stopped. He said, "Look, Manuel, please come and take me from here because I cannot drive." Like, it really froze. He couldn't drive because the traffic was so chaotic to him that he couldn't, though he was driving a car. So I just want to agree with her that it's very important for us to understand the societal view and feelings about it, so that we train them, and of course we organize the traffic, not only for the security of the pedestrian, those cycling, but also of motorbikes and of car owners.
And may I just add one other category of people, because you're a mayor of Mozambique? Tourists.
Yep.
Tourists may come from a place where they don't have a big cycling culture or lanes for cycling, so when they enter, whether they're renting a car, it's incredibly intimidating. So I can understand why your friend froze, because if it's completely novel for them, you can train a local or someone there for a while. But if you are keen on a tourist population to your city, it's also something to take into account. Thanks.
David?
There was just one thing I wanted to pick up on. I mean, to hear, and we were talking about this backstage, 10 kilometers for $400,000. And I was just in a conversation in the UK about a bike lane, which is about £1 million for 1 kilometer. And I think this is something that we really, and I say we, the Anglosphere, need to learn from you. We need to really go back and learn from everything you're doing here, from everything that you're doing in Mozambique, around reducing the costs of infrastructure. And we've made this really expensive, and it's not making it better. It's just meaning that we get 1 kilometer instead of a network of 200. And then, yes, we might have moved all the utilities, we might have got everything out of the way, and everyone's being consulted, blah, blah, blah. But actually, we've got 1 kilometer where your 10-year-old can cycle safely. And I think it's a policy area, not just in cycling, but also in trams as well. And we were sort of talking about accessibility. There's, one of the best, most accessible forms of transport is a level boarding. You can put bikes on there. It's really good for prams. As I know from recent experience, it's really good for wheelchairs. You can get lots of people on and off very quickly. But we make it in the UK by policy really, really expensive. And we need to kind of relearn from innovative projects. There's kind of very light rail projects in Coventry and in the UK at the moment, which are trying to kind of quarter the cost of this. And until the Anglosphere do this and relearn these lessons, we're not going to kind of build the networks to protect the planet as well.
I want to move on to the sort of final area of discussion, which is, Agustin, for you, what do you think is the simplest change that can make cycling safer in London?
Well, excellent question. Safety is priority one for us. A lot of learning from this 4 years of operation and more than 80 million rides. So, but just before I answer that question, I think infrastructure is crucial for security and for having like a proper scheme in any city. Like we have seen after the investment that London did, they doubled the number of rides from 250 million to 500,000 rides, I believe. But that only represents 5% of the total rides in general in London. So I really believe that if the city or the mayor or government invest in infrastructure, we can make that number the double. So 10% and at the end 1 billion rides per year. So I think that's a challenge. And in terms of like measures, like even though we are an operator and our goal is to give to the user a very safe bike that they can use, we cannot stop them to stop in a red light. That's something that it requires investment from the city too, same as in a car, that if someone wants to skip a red light, the police should stop or give a ticket. The same should happen with the bikes, more and more regulation in that sense. But again, if we invest more in infrastructure, I hope we will not have red lights for bikes. That's the goal, and maybe no cars. So everything is connected, but it's a transition that the city is asking for bikes. It's the future. I have no doubt about it. So we need to work together with authority. We have to do our best to have the best bike on the street, but at the same time, the authority need to plan based on what the city is asking and have a proper scheme that help people to ride safe. One of the biggest problem in the UK is people skipping the red lights, and that create more accidents. So we are doing a common sense campaign to try to promote them to stop and even do not charge when the bike is stopping in front of a red line. So we are trying to do our best, but it is not something that we can do alone. It's something that we need and we must work together with the authority to create a better city and push London or any city in the world to be a cycle city. It's by far the best option for a city because it's healthy, it's sustainable, and it's fun. So I don't see why not pushing the e-bikes. We have demonstrated it's profitable too, sustainable, so we are here to talk with anyone who wants to understand more about our scheme and, of course, support in whatever we can do too, but also to try to make clear to all the authorities that are here today to put, I will say, a lot of focus in the e-bikes and the sharing scheme. That for me, it is the future and how we will move now and in a couple of years. So, yeah.
I agree with you about the running of red lights. I lived in London for 5 years and I saw it time and time again, and everyone's just trying to get to work as quickly as possible by bike, which is great. But there are just so many crossings. And it's just it becomes very dangerous. Manuel, just quickly, we've only got a couple of minutes left, but it'd be great to hear what you think would be the simplest change that you can make to make cycling safer in cities.
Well, again, I think I will agree with him that infrastructure is the number one. But also the second will be enforcement. You know, like the rules needs to be enforced.
Yeah.
So if some because you may have a cycle lane, but people may not be using it. So you need like the municipal police to be there at least for the first 6 months to make sure that this is happening. And if you don't follow the rules, that's you will get a ticket. But to me, definitely. It's the infrastructure because when we managed to build this cycle lane, it literally doubled the number of people, and specifically for the most vulnerable groups, mainly children and women. So if they feel safe, and they feel safe because there is infrastructure that is protecting them. And when I say infrastructure, I don't mean the physical infrastructure alone. I mean the law enforcement infrastructure and the whole governance structure in the city. Those factors need to be aligned so that the policy bears its results. Otherwise, it will not fulfill its objectives.
Thank you. I think we're going to have to call it a day there. But this has been a topic that I report on a lot at Zag Daily, and a kind of very close topic to my heart as well in a way. So I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.